A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. This is the program for the Quran translation and small little explanation for the Taraweeh prayer. So verse number 165 of Suratul Baqarah. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَندَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُم كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. What is the title about it? The title about it is regrets about wasted life on Judgment Day. When there will be a Yawmul Qiyamah, Day of Judgment, we will regret about our time we have wasted in this life, in not advancing ourselves and for the betterment of the hereafter. And we have wasted our time in these worldly things. Some people still take idols beside Allah, loving them as much as they love Allah. So what does idol mean? Idol refers not only to the physical statues. We know the statues made of stone, they are idols. They are very known to everyone, but that people worship. But any material thing in which one puts trust instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this could be wealth, this could be career, this could be family, this could be technological gadgets, and even gangs. This doesn't mean that we don't need these resources in our life. We need these resources, but we cannot just rely on them that, okay, I have the wealth, so I can buy anything, and I don't care about the akhirah, I don't care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, na'uzubillah. But we should believe that even this, everything is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the real doer, the real fa'al is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas those who believe love Allah passionately. Whereas those who believe, they love Allah passionately. So the believers, they love Allah passionately. If only the wrongdoers could see the punishment, they would realize that Allah possesses all power and that Allah's punishment is severe. On Judgment Day, the next verse. On Judgment Day, the followers of idols will be disowned by the idols they served, and they will see the punishment, and their ties with these idols torn to shreds, it will be broken. Then the followers will say, if only we had another chance, so we could disown them as they have disowned us today. That is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show them their deeds, which they will bitterly regret, and they will never get out of the fire of hell. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from the hellfire. What is the next theme? How Satan influenced people. This is the influence. This is the topic, subheading. Verse number 168, people, eat of what is lawful and wholesome on earth, and do not follow the footsteps of Satan. He is your open enemy. Aduwwe mubin. Shaitan is our open enemy. He will direct you to evil, indecency, and saying things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which you do not know. I see in my life, I have observed everywhere in Pakistan and here in Canada as well, that people talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which they really don't know anything about. It's okay, Allah will forgive us, it's okay, we don't need to pray, we don't need to do zakat, Allah is forgiving. And for these worldly things, we strive so much, we go an extra mile for worldly things. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we just say things about Allah which you do not know. This is Quran. We need to look at our behavior, about our attitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the disbelievers are told, follow what Allah has revealed, they say, no, we follow what we found our ancestors doing, even though their ancestors lacked both basic understanding and guidance. The disbelievers are like the bleating sheep being called loudly by the shepherd. They hear nothing but crying and screaming, deaf, dumb, and blind. They simply do not understand. This is the second time this deaf, dumb, and blind has come. It came before in Surah Baqarah. Khatamallahu ala qulubihim wala sami wala absarim. Summun bukmun umyun. The next, meat which is unlawful to eat. This is another law, because remember, this is a Madanian life. This is the second hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the laws of the state are being in formation. Meat which is unlawful to eat. Verse number 172. Believers, eat the wholesome food we provide you and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you truly worship Him. Next verse, verse number 173. The few things He has made unlawful for you are, carry on, blood, pork, and animals slaughtered in any name other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, if anyone is compelled by circumstances, which are, for example, if you hate the thought but you are dying of hunger or thirst, or being force fed by a captor, or are told you will be killed if you refuse to do so, then consuming such meat is not a sin. Not because he desires it or wishes to disobey Allah, then he commits no sin. Allah is the forgiving, the kind. The next subheading, it is wrong to use religion for worldly gains. This is very important. This is for our ulama, the scholars, the mashayikh, the spiritual guides, and all the other people who sell the religion for their worldly affairs. It is wrong to use religion for worldly gains. Verse number 174, anyone who hides what Allah has revealed of the book, or sells it for a small sum of money, are filling their stomachs with hellfire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. Allah will neither speak to them nor purify them on judgment day. They shall have a painful punishment. May Allah save us. They have chosen for themselves error over guidance. They have chosen for themselves error over guidance, and punishment over forgiveness. How will they endure hellfire? Who can, and who, there are the scholars who always talk about who has the power to bear the punishment of hellfire, the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who endures to do that? No one can. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. That is because Allah has sent the book with the truth. But those who differ about the book have digressed with far-fetched heresy. Far-fetched. People who disagree with the book, they bring the stories which are nothing, far-fetched. Lafi shakakim ba'id. They're this far-fetched heresy. What is righteousness? This is the beautiful heading. What is the righteousness? What is right? What is the Siratul Mustaqim? Righteousness is not simply turning your face towards the east or the west during the prayer. Rather, what is righteousness? This is the definition of the righteousness through the Quran, the Quranic definition. Righteousness is believing in Allah, number one. The last day, Yawmul Qiyamah. The angels, the revealed books, and the prophets, alayhimus salam. Spending wealth for the love of Allah. Spending your wealth for the love of Allah on whom? On relatives, on orphans, the needy, travelers, beggars, and freeing slaves, performing prayers and paying zakat. So these are the وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ وَالسَّائِلِينَ فِي الرِّقَابِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوا الزَّكَاةَ وَالْمُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِهِمْ إِذَا عَاهَدُوا. And they spend their wealth, they fulfill any contracts one has entered, and being patient in illness, misfortune, and in times of hardship. Those who do these things are the truthful people, and they are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next heading, next subheading, verse number 178. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kutiba alaykumul qisasu fil qatla. This is another law. The first law was about the food, like what things you can eat, what things you cannot eat, what is righteousness. Now the laws of taking revenge for justice. How much can you do? How much revenge is allowed? Believers, retribution is prescribed for you in the case of victims of murders. A free man for a free man, a slave for a slave, and a woman for a woman. However, if the culprit is pardoned by his aggrieved brother, this shall be adhered to in accordance with the best practices. The culprit paying the next of kin what is due. The culprit will pay the ransom to the next of the kin. This represents a lightening of the burden and an act of kindness from your Lord. After this day, if anyone goes beyond these limits, if transgress these limits, they will suffer a painful punishment. This is a law of and if some murder happens, so there is murder for murder, slave for slave, women for women. The people of understanding will appreciate that in the law of retribution, qasas, there is a means for preserving life so that you are stopped from being unfair. Like if you know that if I kill someone, what are the consequences? You will think many times before you commit this heinous crime. So this is the philosophy of the punishment in Islam. Instructions for writing a will. Another law, will is very important. We observe this every day. We don't know, kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut. Whenever the time will come, and it becomes very hard, particularly in this Western societies we live, it is very important that you always write your will. And this is the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, verse number 180 of Suratul Baqarah. Also prescribed for you is the writing of a will. Ke kutiba alaykum iza hadara ahakumul mauta izdaraka khaira nal wasiya khaira nil wasiyata lil walidaini wal aqrabini bil ma'ruf. Ke also prescribed for you is the writing of a will. When death approaches any of you who is leaving behind wealth, let him prepare a will in favor of parents and close relatives in accordance with best practices. This is a duty upon those who are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is our duty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq that we adopt the Quran in a full spirit. If any witness after hearing the terms alters them, then they alone shall have committed a sin. So if anybody alters it, then it's a sin. Allah is the hearer, the knower. Anyone who suspects that a testator, the testator is the person who has made the will, has made a mistake intentionally or unintentionally and tries to put things right between the parties, commits no sin in doing so. Allah is the forgiving, the kind. The purpose of fast. Now these verses number 181, 82, 83, they talk about the Ramadan. What is the significance of Ramadan? The purpose of fasting in Ramadan. Believers, fasting has been compulsory for you as it was made compulsory for those before you. So you become mindful of Allah. Muttaqoon, the fear of Allah, mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fast for a fixed number of days. But if any of you is ill, number one, or on a journey that lets him fast an equivalent number of days later, the obligatory compensation for those who do not fast is to feed a needy person. The obligatory compensation on those who do not fast is to feed a needy person if they can afford it. However, anyone who voluntarily does good will benefit from that, but to fast would be better for you if you knew. Next subheading is the Quran was revealed in Ramadan. Verse number 185. The Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan. Shahru Ramadan allazi unzila fihi al-Quran. The Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan. The Quran is a guidance for people. It contains clear teachings and distinguishes right from wrong. Whoever is present in the month must fast in it. But if anyone is ill or on a journey, then let them fast an equivalent number of days later. So if someone is on a journey or is ill, he can fast on later days, the equal number of days. Allah wants ease for you, not difficulty. This is beautiful. This karam, the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that yuridullahu bikumul yusra wa la yuridu bikumul usr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is another principle of the Sharia, that Allah wants ease for you, not difficulty, and wants to see you complete the compulsory number of fasts. This is so important for the Ramadan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ. This is like you must have to complete the number of fastings. So glorify Allah for guiding you and be ever thankful. Allah answers our prayers. Beautiful. Verse number 186. This is a beautiful verse. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. Beautiful. Verse number 186. If my servant asks you about me, tell them that I am near. I answer the prayer of the prayerful whenever he prays to me. So let them obey me and believe in me so they may be guided. Next verse. A rule for married couples in Ramadan. Another explanation of the Ramadan. It is permissible for you to sleep with your wives during the nights of the fast. They are like a garment for you as you are for them. Allah knew that you were deceiving yourselves by what you were doing in secret. Like going to your wives during the night, and at that time they didn't knew that it is permissible. And He has relented towards you and pardoned you. So now be intimate with them and desire whatever Allah has intended for you. And eat and drink until the white strike of dawn is distinct from the blackness of the night. Then complete the fast until the nightfall. However, do not be intimate with your wives on those nights when you are engaged in a spiritual retreat in the mosque. Itikaf. Itikaf is spiritual retreat. So when you are mutakif, when you are doing itikaf in Ramadan, then you do not intimate with your wives. These are Allah's boundaries, so do not breach them. This is how Allah explains His verses for people. This is how Allah explains His verses for people, so they become mindful. Yattaqoon, mindful. This is a beautiful translation of the taqwa, pietiness. Next, bribery, fraud, and squandering one's wealth are all immoral. So verse number 188, do not misuse your wealth by spending it among yourselves for wrong purpose. So many people waste their money. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. Or by deliberately bribing judges to misuse a part of other people's wealth wrongfully. Next subheading, 2 questions, the lunar calendar and entering people's house. They ask you about the crescent moon. Say, it is to help people keep track of time, not least for the pilgrimages. There is no virtue in entering homes from back. It was considered a noble deed to enter your homes from the backyard in Mecca during the days of the Hajj. So, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is abolishing this custom, and there is no virtue in it. So we need to realize that whatever customs we have made which have no basis in Sharia, there is no virtue in entering homes from the back, but virtue lies in piety. Virtue lies in piety. Enter homes from front doors and be mindful of Allah, so you may be successful. Next, fighting is only permitted in self-defense. Fighting in Allah's way, those who fight you but do not attack first. Allah does not like aggressors. When in battle, fight them wherever you find them and expel them from where they expelled you. A prolonged campaign of persecution is far worse than a decisive battle involving killing. Do not attack them near the sacred mosque, Kaabatullah, until they attack you. If they attack you, fight back. That is the way to deal with the disbelievers. If they cease fighting, Allah is the forgiving, the kind. The next verse, the next heading, just retaliation to end persecution is allowed. So if somebody is persecuting you, you retaliate to end it. Fight them until there is no more persecution, and people are free to worship Allah. If they cease fighting, then let there be no hostility except against wrongdoers. This verse and other verses which permit fighting are giving permission for self-defense only. This is an agreed opinion of all commentators and jurists. Fighting can only be authorized by legitimately elected governments, not self-proclaimed leaders. This passage was revealed when Muslims were performing the Umrah and were anxious about what to do if they were attacked by the Makkans. So this is specific instructions that they were doing Umrah, and they had the anxiety that if they are attacked, what will be their course of action. If they cease fighting, then there will be no hostility except against wrongdoers. A sacred month always remains a sacred month. Therefore, any violation of what Allah has forbidden calls for retaliation. If someone is hostile to you, respond in equal measure and be mindful of Allah, and know for certain that Allah is with the pious. Allah is with the people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Spend generously in Allah's way. Spend generously in Allah's way. May Allah give us tawfiq that if we spend very generously in Allah's way, but do not cast yourselves into the jaws of destruction by your own hands. This is the principle of the Quran, that although it is encouraging you to spend in the way of Allah, but not cast yourselves into the jaws of destruction by your own hands, and do your best. This also means that never stop raising your voice against the persecution. Like if you do that, if you do not raise your voice against persecution, if you do not do whatever is needed to be done against the persecution, if you do not retaliate in the right way, then you are putting yourself into destruction, into the jaws of destruction. Allah loves those who do good. Next heading, how to compensate for an incomplete pilgrimage. The Hajj, incomplete. If some mistake happens, how can you complete it? Another law of the Sharia. Perform Hajj and Umrah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything you do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you are prevented from performing Umrah, then make whatever sacrificial offerings you can afford. Do not shave your heads until your offerings has reached the place of sacrifice in Mina. Like until your animals have been sacrificed, do not shave your heads. Mukassirin, kasra. If any one of you is ill or has a disease of the scalp, then he should fast, give in charity, or make a sacrifice in compensation. So he doesn't need to shave his head. He can compensate. There are three ways of compensation: fast, charity, or do an animal sacrifice. When you are safe, then anyone wishing to take a break between Hajj and Umrah must make whatever sacrificial offering he can afford. And anyone who lacks the means to do so should fast for 3 days during the pilgrimage and 7 days after returning home. So 10 days of fasting, 3 days he can do in the haram, and 7 days upon returning. That is 10 days in all. This applies to those whose families do not live near the sacred mosque, who do not live near Makkah. Be mindful of Allah and remember Allah's penalty is severe. Allah's punishment is severe. The rites of the Hajj, the rituals of the Hajj. Hajj takes place in the specified months. As we know, it's a Zil Hajj. And anyone undertaking this duty must not engage in sexual intimacy with one's spouse, wickedness or quarreling. Wickedness or quarreling. So no quarreling, no wickedness, no intimacy with your one's spouse. Whatever good you do, Allah knows it. Prepare yourselves for Hajj. Prepare yourselves for Hajj. And the best preparation is being mindful of Allah. Subhanallah. Beautiful. Now we perform Hajj. What is the preparation for the Hajj? Subhanallah. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمُهُ وَتَزَوَّدُوا إِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Prepare yourselves for Hajj, and the best preparation for Hajj is being mindfulness of Allah, being mindful of Allah, be fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be caring of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People of understanding, be mindful of me. There is no sin in seeking your Lord's bounty by offering a service while performing your Hajj. When you leave Mount Arafat, remember Allah at the sacred place of Muzdalifah. Remember Him because He guided you when in the past you were misguided. Then set off from where other people set off and seek Allah's forgiveness, because the Quraysh, they used to set off from a different place. Indeed, Allah is the forgiving, the compassionate. The pilgrim's prayer. Once you have completed your rites, remember Allah as you used to remember your ancestors, or even more. There are people who pray, "O Lord, grant us wealth in this world. They will have no share in the hereafter." This is very mindful that we only look for wealth in this world. Then may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who Rabbana atina fi dunya hasanatam wa fil akhirati hasanatam. This is the teaching of the Quran in another verse. But others pray. What do others pray? Rabbana atina fi dunya wa ma lahu fil akhirati min khallaq. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. O Lord, grant us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and protect us from punishment of the fire. Such people will have a full share of what they earned, and Allah is swift in calculating good and bad deeds. Keep remembering Allah for a few more days. But if anyone is in a hurry to leave after 2 days, he can. He will not have sinned, nor will anyone who delays his departure have sinned, so long as he is mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah. So many times this word has been used, that we should be caring about Allah. We should mind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's injunctions, verses, message, guidance, the guidelines. Be mindful of Allah and know that you will be gathered before Him. The next heading is the troublemaker. The troublemaker. There is a type of a person whose speech will please you, and he even calls on Allah as a witness to what is in his heart. Yet he is the bitterest of the opponents. As soon as he turns away, he makes mischief in the land, destroying crops and cattle. Allah detests mischief. When he is told, "Fear Allah," his pride leads him to sin. Hell is good enough for him. What a dreadful place to be in. This is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُعْجِبُكَ قَوْلُهُ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيُشْهِدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا فِي قَلْبِهِ هُوَ أَلَدُّ الْخِصَامِ. The peacemaker who is committed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beautiful verse. Yet, this is the contrast of the two peoples. There are the troublemakers and the peacemakers. The troublemakers are the ones who who create mischief in the earth. Verse number 204, 5 and 6. And verse number 207 and 208, 209, three verses, they talk about the peacemakers in this world. Who are those? وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ رَءُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. Yet there is another type of a person who would give away his life. Who would give away his life to gain Allah's pleasure. Allah is compassionate to his servants. Believers submit and dedicate fully and do not follow in the footsteps of Satan. He is your sworn enemy. If you should turn back after clear signs have come to you, then know that Allah is the Almighty and the Wise. What are they waiting for? Allah and the angels to come down in the shade of the clouds? What are they waiting for? هَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظُلُلٍ مِّنَ الْغُمَامِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. What are they waiting for? This is very decisive verse. What are they waiting for? هَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا أَنْ يَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظُلُلٍ. They are waiting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come in the shades of the clouds, and his angels should come in the shades of the clouds. By then their fate will have been sealed. By then they will be done, past and closed transaction. In the end, all matters return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورُ وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. Then it will be done deal. Next subheading is success in this life is no guarantee of success in the next life. Beautiful. Success in this life is no guarantee of success in the next. Ask the Israelites. How many clear signs we gave them? Anyone who exchanges the gift of Allah for something else after it has been granted to him, beware, Allah is severe in his punishment. The worldly life is attractive for the disbelievers. The worldly life is attractive for the disbelievers. They may mock some believers now, but the pious will rise above them on Judgment Day. In this world, it may happen that the disbelievers are more successful. They may mock, they may make fun of the believers, but the pious will rise above them on Judgment Day. Allah will provide abundantly to those who He wishes. Next heading, gaining knowledge prompts some people to argue. This is some people who get a small little knowledge. They try to argue about things they really don't have the solid knowledge. They are not the technical people about that. They are not the professionals about that. So, for example, in the case of the religious verdicts in the fatwa, the people just talk about with little knowledge. Humanity was once a single nation. Then Allah sent prophets, alayhimussalam, who brought good news and warnings. And He sent with them the book containing the truth, providing rulings to help people solve their differences. This was due to the rivalry that arose from differences of interpretation after clear signs had come to the people of the book. However, Allah, by His authority, guided the believers to the truth regarding the point of disagreement. Allah guides to the straight path anyone who wants to be guided. So if you really want to be guided, Allah will guide you to the straight path. Next heading, every generation of believers has been tested. Did you think of entering paradise without experiencing the likes of those who came before you? They were struck by misfortune and hardships and were subjected to earthquakes, even the messengers of that time. And those who believed Him, they cried out, when will Allah's help come? The help of Allah is near. They ask you what they should spend their wealth on. Tell them. Now this is the rule. Where do you spend your wealth on? Spend on your parents. Spend on your relatives, orphans, the needy, and the travelers. Whatever good you have done, Allah is the knower and is fully aware of it. Next verse is verse number 216. Sometimes fighting is the lesser of two evils. War is allowed though you dislike it. Sometimes you may dislike something that is good for you, and sometimes you may like something that is bad for you. This is beautiful. The Quranic verse, the wa'asa an takrahu shay'an wa huwa khairul lakum wa asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa sharrul lakum wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. Only Allah knows the whole truth, not you. They ask you about the sacred months and specifically fighting in them. Say fighting in them is a major sin. But blocking the way of Allah and rejecting Him, bearing access to the sacred mosque and expelling its residents from it These are even greater offenses on Allah's side. A prolonged campaign of persecution is a far greater sin than a decisive battle involving killing. Wal fitnatu akbarum min al qatl. The disbelievers will go on fighting until they achieve what they want, and that you give up your religion. What the disbelievers want is that you give up your religion. But beware, if any of you gives up his religion and dies as a disbeliever, such people's deeds will come to nothing in this world and in the hereafter. These are people of the fire, where they will stay forever. The believers who migrated and struggled in Allah's way have full hope in Allah's kindness. Allah is the forgiving, the kind. Next heading, questions on alcohol, gambling, charity and orphans. These are the questions. These are the laws being made for the state. Now, believe in Medina, this is a state. They ask you about wine and gambling, say both are major sins. So gambling and wine, they are major sins. There is a small benefit for people, but the sin in them by far outweighs any benefits. They ask you what they should spend in charity, how much wealth they should spend, how much portion of their wealth they should spend in charity. Whatever you can spare. This is how Allah explains His verses to you so that you may reflect in this world and the next. They also ask you about orphans. Say, keeping their affairs and accounts in order is best. Keeping their affairs and accounts in order is best. If you mix your investments with theirs, remember that they are your brothers and sisters, and Allah knows well who is straight and who is dishonest. If Allah so wished, He could put you in all kinds of difficulties. He is the Almighty, the Wise. Next heading, going to paradise or hell may be determined by who one marries. Do not marry disbelieving women until they believe. A female slave who believes is better than an adulteress. Even if the adulteress pleases you more. So a free woman who worships idols is worse than a slave who is a Muslim. Similarly, do not marry believing women to any idolater until they believe. A male slave who believes is better than an idolater, even if the idolater is more pleasing. These idolaters invite you to the fire, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His grace invites you to paradise and forgiveness. And He explains His verses to people so that they may be reminded. Next verse, verse number 222. The heading for this verse is an answer to a question about menstruation and sexual intimacy. They ask you about menstruation. Say, it is a sore state that women go through every month. So stay away from sexual intimacy with women during menstruation, and do not approach them for that purpose until they are clean again. However, once they are clean, come to them as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed you. Allah loves those who repent, and He loves those who maintain cleanliness. Your women are like pastures for you, so you enter your pastures as you wish, and prepare for yourselves good deeds. Be mindful of Allah. Remember, you will meet Him, and you, Muhammad, continue to give good news to the believers. Next, 224. Ruling about settling marital disputes. Do not make your oaths in the name of Allah an excuse to stop you from doing good, being mindful, and reconciling people who are undergoing some marital dispute. Allah is the hearer, the knower. Allah will not hold you thoughtless. Allah will not hold your thoughtless oaths against you, but He will take you to task over your heart's intentions. Allah is the forgiving, the gentle. For those who take an oath to separate from their wives, the waiting period is 4 months. But if they go back on their oath, then they will find Allah forgiving, most kind. However, if they are determined to divorce, then Allah is the hearer and the knower. The rights and responsibilities of married couples and divorces. Divorced women must wait for 3 menstrual cycles before they can marry. It is not lawful for them to keep secret what Allah has created in their womb. Like if they are pregnant, they should reveal it. If they believe in Allah and the last day, their husbands have the right to take them back under such circumstances. if they wish to be reconciled. Women too have rights and responsibilities in equal measure according to the custom. However, men have an additional degree of rights and responsibilities over them because they provide for the. In Islam, the men are the providers and the protectors. This is their duty. Allah is the Almighty, the Wise. What to do if marriage guidance and reconciliation they fail? What should we do? A divorce may be pronounced twice only after a wife must either be kept honorably or allowed to leave honorably. It is not lawful for you, husbands, to take back anything that you have given them, your wives, except when both parties fear that they may not be able to live within Allah's boundaries. However, if after attempting reconciliation, you believe that the couple may not be able to live within the bounds set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there will be no blame on either of them if the woman chooses to. The couple may not be able to live within the bounds set by Allah, then there will be no blame on either of them if the woman chooses to give back part of the settlement. These are Allah's boundaries, so do not overstep them. Only the wrongdoers overstep Allah's boundaries. Third time divorce. If the husband divorces her a third time, she will no longer be lawful for him to remarry until she marries another husband. Then, if the second husband divorces her, there will be no blame on either of them to return to each other, provided they feel confident that they will keep within Allah's boundaries. From here, some people, they just do the, Rasulullah Sallam has cursed upon the people who do halala, like they don't have the intention to marry someone in the real sense, but they just marry to divorce her and give it to the previous husband. So this is, Rasulullah Sallam has cursed upon to the person who is, for whom it's being done, and the one who does it. There are Allah's boundaries which He has explained for people who understand. Do not be unjust when going through divorce. When you divorce women and they reach the end of the waiting period, either keep them honorably or allow them to leave honorably. Do not hold on to them to cause harm or to transgress Allah's boundaries. Whoever does not have wronged himself, do not play with the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember His favors on you and what He has revealed to you of the book and wisdom through which He teaches you. Wisdom is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So be mindful of Allah and know that He is the knower. When you divorce women and they reach the end of the waiting period, do not prevent them from remarrying their former husbands, if they choose to do so by mutual consent and according to the custom. Anyone who sincerely believes in Allah and the last day is instructed to do this. This is a purer and cleaner way for you by far. Allah knows that which you do not know. Next heading. A father will pay maintenance expenses for his children. Divorced mothers may breastfeed their children up to 2 full years. That is, if they wish to complete the full term. The father of the child is responsible for the mother's food and clothing in accordance with the best practice. However, no one is to be burdened over and above their means. However, no one is to be burdened over and above their means. Rizquhunna wa kiswatuhunna bil ma'ruf wa la tukallifu nafsan illa wus'aha. No one is to be burdened over and above their means. Neither should the mother be harmed because of her child, nor the father. The same goes for the father's heirs. No one shall be to blame if father wishes to wean the child, and if it is agreed by mutual consent after proper consultation. Likewise, if you wish to employ a wet nurse for your children, you shall not be in any way to be blamed. If you pay as agreed in accordance with the best practice, always be mindful of Allah and know that He sees what you do. Next verse number 234 and 35. The waiting period for widows and an encouragement to remarry. This is the heading for this. Those of you who die leaving behind widows, their widows should wait for 4 months and 10 days. Then, once they had reached the end of this period, there is no blame on you regarding whatever they chose to do with themselves in accordance with the best practice. Allah is aware of what you do. There is no blame on you if you propose engagement to these women before the end of the waiting period. There is no blame on you if you propose engagement to these women before the end of the waiting period, or you keep your feelings to yourself. Allah knows that you intend to propose to them. However, do not make them any promises unless you speak to them in respectful way, and do not confirm contracting the marriage until the prescribed waiting term has ended. And do not confirm contracting the marriage until the prescribed waiting time has ended. 234. وَلَا تَعْزِمُوا عُقْدَةَ النِّكَاحِ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ فَاحْذَرُوهُ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ عَلِيمٌ. However, do not make them any promise unless you speak to them in a respectful way, and do not confirm contracting the marriage until the prescribed waiting term has ended. Remember that Allah knows what is in your hearts, so beware. Allah is the all-forgiving, the gentle. Next, what to do if divorce occurs before a marriage is consummated, before the intercourse. There is no blame on you if you divorce a woman before either consummating the marriage or paying the marriage gift. Mahar. Let the rich and the poor each give them generously according to their means. This is a duty on the righteous. If you divorce them before consummation but after payment of the marriage gift, then let them have half of what you had previously settled on, unless the women agree to waive their right on the one contracting the marriage. Tai waives his right, and waiving one's right is nearer to piety. So do not. Waiving one's right is nearer to piety. This is a principle of Islam, principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that waiving your right is nearer to piety. So do not forget to be gracious to each other, because Allah sees all that you do. Next is, never neglect your prayers under any circumstances. Make sure to perform your daily prayers, particularly the middle one, Salatul Wusta, Asr, and stand devotedly before Allah. This is the emphasis upon performing the Salat. Make sure to perform your daily prayers, particularly the middle one, Salatul Wusta. Hafizu ala salawati was Salatul Wusta wa qumu lillahi qanitin. And when you stand in the prayers, be contented with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verse number 239. If you are fearful of any enemy, then pray standing or in the saddle. Then when you are safe and secure once more, then remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who taught you what you did not know. Next verse is verse number 240. Further rulings on maintenance for widows and divorces. Those of you who die leaving behind widows should make a will for their maintenance for 1 year. They should not be expelled from the family home. However, if they choose to leave the family home, then you cannot be blamed with regards to what they have chosen to do in line with the custom. Allah is the Almighty, the Wise. Divorced women are entitled to maintenance in line with custom. This is a duty on the pious. This is how Allah explains His verses for you, so that you might understand. We'll stop here at 240. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand the Quran and act upon it. Inshallah, we'll continue with the next program. Sallallahu ta'ala ala khairi halqihi Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.